Welcome to How It Works with Holger. This is part 2 of the web deployment series. We already covered why we do need web deployment for web applications and what is deployment in relation to Delphi executables. And we have looked at the core of a TMS web core application, what happens if you compile it and run it, and what is going on under the hood. Today, before we look at the scenarios, Windows, Linux, and Docker, I would like to write our own web server. And if you're like, gosh, he's going right down the chute, to get to the difficult part, this is actually not as difficult because TMS Business has a product called TMS Sparkle, and that makes it really, really easy to write your own web services, or web server, I should say. I always mess up web services and web server because if we go deeper into this series, you will see that a web service is actually nothing but a web server providing a certain endpoint and that returns certain data instead of a page, an HTML page. It's not that different from a web server that delivers a page. A web service just returns data in a certain format, JSON or XML, and that's why I always slip up. So apologies for that. So we will build a web server in this episode. And before I get started with Delphi, there's one thing I do all the time before I start working with Delphi on a new day, so to speak. I go into my install directory, and in this install directory, I have my TMS Smart Setup executable. And the configuration is set up for my Delphi 12 that is installed on the system and nothing else. Just a reminder, Aaron, please put a link in the comments. This is the new TMS Smart Setup, and I have a video how you can set this up just the same way, also using the same directory, and I get you there step by step. Of course, I could do a batch file that does these commands, but then you wouldn't see what I'm doing. So this is why I show these steps manually. So the first thing I do is TMS self update to make sure that I have the latest version of TMS Smart Setup. And when it looks like I don't have the latest version, see, whoops, there we go. We get a new version of TMS Smart Setup. And then I'm going to call TMS update to make sure that all my products are up to date. And we see that all my products are up to date because everything is being skipped instead of being fetched. And now the only reason why the Smart Setup doesn't conclude is I could have made changes to the configuration, and thus it might need to register new Delphi IDEs or unregister Delphi IDEs. So that's why it doesn't close right away. So everything is up to date. And you see I have installed TMS Sparkle, which we will work with right now. As a reminder, in part 1, we built this very, very simple web application, and we created a debug version and a release version, and that's what we're going to do first. We're going to create a current, so I'm going to delete the old one, a current release version of our web application, because that's the application that we want to put into our own web server. So we reopen the web application as a first step. We named it Hello World. And I switch to release and I compile. And at that point, when we go to the Explorer while the compile process is running, we see that the release directory is being created and these files have been updated. So this is going to be our application that we're going to deploy into the web server. Okay, and now we can close this and we can save the changes, yes. And now we want to create a new VCL application. That's the easiest thing because this is going to be a Windows web server. And we don't really need the form. We can do 2 buttons. We can do 1 button to start the server and 1 button to stop the server. So very simple with Delphi. Let me change the font on the form, make it a little bit bigger. So here we have, let's do 12. And then this is going to be the start button, name button start. This is going to be the stop button, and the caption is going to be stop, and this caption is going to be start. We're not going to bother with using icons or anything like that. Going to keep it as is, and going to make it small. And you can add a status bar and things like that. The caption is going to be example web server for hello world, for our hello world web application. Of course, you could implement it in a way that you can host all your web applications. This is just an example how you can write a web server for your own web applications so that you can present it. For example, let's say you have somebody that wants to promote your web application and you want to give that person the latest version of your web application. You can give him this wrapper, and that wrapper will then allow the person to do presentations with your web application, for example, locally on that system. Okay, so going from here, start, stop. Let me also change the border of the form. What is it called? Is it called border style? And I want it to be size, not sizable, just a tool window without the ability to resize. And if we save this, so I just named this web server u form main. That's it. And if we run the application, obviously right now, oh, it's called project 1. I made a mistake. Save all. And let's save also the project. So this is the hello world server. That's literally what we're going to name it. We need to do a little bit of cleanup here because right now the project on the direct, because right now on the disk it looks like this, and if I compile this application, it's going to create basically a DCU directory and all that kind of stuff here. I want to create a binary directory here where our executable goes, and there as a subdirectory I'm going to create an app directory. And into that app directory, I'm going to copy our web application. So right here, I'm going to do TMS web release, copy these files, copy. You can also move. So paste. So now we have web server, our VCL application, binary, nothing in there yet, and application contains our web application. So going from there, we must make sure that this gets compiled to the app directory. So I'm going to go to the Delphi compiler. I'm going to take all configurations, only 32-bit, output directory, and then I'm going to say ./bin. So with that, if we compile this again, we should get a file in the correct directory where we would like it. So we go here to bin. There's our hello world server, and if we start it, it is right there. From there, we go, and basically we need the component that gives us the web server. And if you enter Sparkle into the tool palette, you get the HTTP sys dispatcher, something you might have heard about when you worked with Xdata, and we have a static server and a generic server. We need a static server here. Static means you specify a directory and that directory is being served on the web. A generic server gets a request and then you can write events to handle those requests. You don't need anything that's complicated here. You just need the static server. I'm going to call it server, and here you go. That's where the dispatcher comes in. So we also need the Sparkle dispatcher. And if you read this word, HTTP sys, that came up in the first part of the series, HTTP sys is the system how Microsoft on Windows handles your HTTP stack. That's what Microsoft called it. And this dispatcher is where you define basically the communication with the network layer, so to speak. So this dispatcher here has to be connected to the server. And the base URL is where you specify under which port your server can be reached. So for example, you can say HTTP 8000 and nothing afterwards. So you would have a web server on port 8000 localhost. However, that would be a bad choice on this system because you know that 8000 is used by TMS Web Core for its own development purposes. So it is a much better choice to pick, for example, 8001 to have a different number, okay? You can pick any number you want that is not reserved in your system. However, if we now set the, and this is a little bit strange, you don't set the active property on the server to true, you set it on the dispatcher to true. So that's actually the first thing. We say here, basically two methods. We have procedure start server, procedure stop server, and then we need a property. We make that public for whatever reason. We call it active or server online. That's a Boolean property. And for example, we don't want it to use the field. We want it only to be read-only because we can't set the state of the server, obviously. We can say get server online. And in order to know if the server is online or not, we can say, when we don't use the server, we just go to the dispatcher here and read its active property. So we say result is dispatcher.active. It's true if the server is online, it's false if the server is not online. And in order to start the server, we just call dispatcher active. It's true. And to stop the server, dispatcher active is false. You might want to check if it is, for example, you can also do this, if server, if not server online, then, but TMS did a pretty good job implementing this. It wouldn't have any consequence if you tried to stop it, if it is already stopped, and vice versa with starting. That wouldn't have any implications, but this is just better code to read. And of course, we now need to also update the user interface depending on how the service state is. So by default, obviously I could also use an action list and stuff like that. I want to complicate it for two buttons. So we set enabled to false. And then each time, I'm basically going to say update interface. And same here, update interface. And update interface is a procedure. Procedure, just have to learn to spell it correctly. Update interface. Then there, we're going to say button stop dot enabled is server online, and button start enabled is server online, but negated. So that means if the server is not online, we can start it. If the server is online, we can stop it. And of course, if the application starts, meaning form create, we call update interface as well. So now we also still have it named form1. I don't like that, so form main. At this point, we need to do two more things. We have to set the base URL and we have to set the root directory. In case you wonder where this is part of TMS Sparkle. So it is somewhere where TMS Sparkle is installed. If you have everything or a Windows search, it makes it easy to find it. And there you go, 8001 is not defined. So we have to add that HTTP plus, and then port 8001. I make it for everyone. Then close this. But now we look at the root directory. The root directory is the directory that the web server serves. Like, what is the root of your server? So meaning if you go to localhost 8001, what is supposed to be served? And what we can do is we set this to our app directory. So here we say, instead of update interface, we also say init server. And init server procedure init server is going to use the application directory. In order to do that, we need from the IO util, so IO util, and there we say our app directory is tpath.get app path. This is Delphi 12. You can do that. Otherwise, it's get library path. And then the path for the server is going to be server.rootdir AST path combine our app directory. And then we said it's going to be in app. So the last thing to do is to link the buttons to start server and this one to stop server. Let's run this. And we click start. And we click stop. And it toggles. So if we click start, the server is started. Now we go to Chrome and type localhost 8001. And there you go. That's our web application. Our server is running, believe it or not. That's how easy it is with Delphi and TMS Sparkle to build a web server. And as soon as you stop the server, your web application keeps running. And with what you learned in part 1, you know why. Because the JavaScript file is running locally in this browser. So there is zero interaction with the server. So at this point, everything is fine, as long as you don't try to refresh it, because as soon as you refresh it, the server is gone and the site can't be reached. But as soon as you start the server again, and then refresh, the application is back. And this way, you can host any of your applications. You could build yourself a user interface where you can flip between the different directories, where you have your different applications. You could also build an INI file. You can, the options are endless, you know? And this is what makes TMS Business such a great product, because all the products build on each other. TMS X Data uses Sparkle in order to create its web presence, so to speak, to create the HTTP stack that you use then to build your web services. Everything is closely tied together. And the static server just gives you the ability to serve a directory, one directory. The generic server, let me just show the component real quick, allows you to, again, you define a dispatcher, and it is the same thing. You have a base URL, but you don't have a root directory. That's missing. Instead, you have events in order to say, hey, what do you want me to do when the process, what do you want me to do to process a request? And if you click here, you get the context that you're in. And in the context, you can then basically have access to the response and have access to the request that comes in. And you have the ability to use the response and then say write or raw writer to access the header and the content of the response. So you can manually create the response that you want to send back to the client if you want to be so inclined. But the the static server serves any file inside of a directory and you can access it. Also, if you have multiple levels in here, for example, in your app directory, you can create a folder, new folder, test, and then you put another document in here, HTML. Yes, I want to create it like this. And then we go to, don't have Visual Studio Code in here, so I have to write it all from scratch. Let's see, do we have an editor at least? Microsoft made it so cumbersome with regards to accessing applications from the context menu, as let's just do HTML, body, and then HTML, and that's right here. H1, this is a test. H1, another, and then here P, another application hosted on the server. Or page, so to speak. Okay, save. And now if we go here and the server is started, that's important. You can literally say /test. And there you go. Because the app directory is your root. And if you add down and go into a different directory here to the test directory, you can serve that as well. That's how flexible this component is. So creating a web server with TMS Sparkle is really, really easy, and it allows you to carry your web applications that you have in a development system very, very easily to other systems in order to give people the ability to make a presentation with your application in place. Of course, if you have a backend, you need to have that backend in place on that machine as well, or that backend is StellarDS. And then as soon as you have an internet connection, that backend is available anywhere. And that is another big advantage to use StellarDS in the beginning to make it very, very easy so that you don't have to consider your backend that much. It's just going to be there and you can concentrate on your web application. So that's part 2 of the deployment series. I hope you enjoyed this excursion into building a web server with TMS Sparkle.